Hi, this is a reading of Intra Muros by Rebecca Springer. This is chapter 16 and 17. You can find all the previous chapters on my YouTube channel. Chapter 16. There is an endearing tenderness in the love of a mother to a son that transcends all other affections of the heart. It is neither to be chilled by selfishness, nor daunted by danger, nor weakened by worthlessness, nor stifled by ingratitude. She will sacrifice every comfort to his convenience. She will surrender every pleasure to his enjoyment. She will glory in his fame and exult in his prosperity. And if adversity overtake him, he will be the dearer to her by misfortune. And if disgrace settle upon his name, she will still love and cherish him. And if all the world beside cast him off, she will be all the world to him. Washington Irving. The current of my life flowed on in the heavenly ways until the months began to lengthen into years, and my daily studies ascended higher in the scale of celestial mysteries. I never wearied of study, though much was taught and gained through the medium of observation in the journeys that I was permitted to take with my brother into different parts of the heavenly kingdom. I never lacked time for social pleasures and enjoyments, for there is no clashing of duties with inclination, no unfulfilled desires, no vain strivings for the unattainable in that life, as in the life of earth. Many precious hours of intercourse were spent in my dear father's home, and sometimes, on rare occasions, I was permitted to accompany him to his field of labor and assist him in instructing those lately come into the new life with little or no preparation for its duties and responsibilities. On one occasion, he said to me, I have the most difficult problem to deal with I have ever yet met in this work. It is how to enlighten and help a man who suddenly plunged from an apparently honorable life into the very depths of crime. I have never been able to get him to accompany me to the river, where these earthly cobwebs would be swept from his poor brain. His excuse being always that God's mercy is so great in allowing him inside heaven's gates at all, that he is content to remain always in its lowest scale of enjoyment in life. No argument or teaching thus far can make him alter his decision. He was led astray by infatuation for a strange woman, and killed his aged mother in order to secure her jewels for this wretched creature. He was executed for the crime, of which in the end he sincerely repented, but he left life with all the horror of the deed clinging to his soul. Has he seen his mother since coming here? Does she know of his arrival? No, she is entirely alone in this world, and it was not thought wise to tell her of his coming till his soul was in a better condition to receive her. He was an only child, and does not lack the elements of refinement, but he was completely under the control of this vile though fascinating woman. It is said she drugged his wine and incited him to do the dreadful deed while under its influence, because of her hatred for his mother, whose influence was against her. When he came from under the influence of the wine, he was horrified at what he had done, and his infatuation for the woman turned to loathing. But alas, too late. He would not see her during his entire incarceration. How long was he in prison? Almost a year. Has he seen the Christ? No, he begs not to see him. He is very repentant and grateful to be saved from the wrath he feels was his just punishment. But though he is conscious that his sin is forgiven, he does not yet feel that he can ever stand in the presence of the Holy One. And here, as upon earth, each must be willing to receive him. His presence is never given undesired. I have not yet appealed for higher help. My ambition is to lead these weak souls upward through the strength entrusted to me. Can you suggest anything that would probably reach him? His mother. May I bring her? He thought a moment reflectively, then said, a woman's intuition. Yes, bring her. I was soon on my way. I found the poor woman, laid the facts gently before her, and waited her decision. There was no hesitancy upon her part. In an instant she said, "My poor boy! Certainly I will go with you at once." We found my father waiting for us, and went immediately to the great home where these students, would we call them, stayed. It was a beautiful great building in the midst of a park, with shaded walks and fountains and flowers everywhere. To one just freed from earth, it seemed a paradise indeed. But to those of us who had tasted heaven's rarer joys, something was wanting. We missed the lovely individual homes, the little children playing on the lawns, the music of the angel choir. It was tame indeed beside the pleasures we had tasted. We found the young man seated beside one of his flower-laden trees, intently pursuing a book that my father had left with him. There was a peaceful look on his pale face, but it was rather the look of patient resignation than of ardent joy. His mother approached him alone, my father and I remaining in the background. After a little time, he glanced up and saw his mother standing near him. A startled look came into his face, and he rose to his feet. She extended her arms toward him and cried out pathetically, "John, my dear boy, come home to me. I need you." That was all. With a low cry, he knelt at her feet and clasped her knees, sobbing, "Mother, mother." She stooped and put her tender arms about him. She drew his head gently to her breast and showered kisses on his bowed head. Oh, the warm mother love, the same in earth and heaven. Only the Christ love can exceed it. Here was this outraged mother, sent into eternity by the hands of him who should have shielded and sustained her, bending above her repentant son with the mother love with which her heart was overflowing, shining upon him from her gentle eyes. I saw my father turn his head to conceal his emotion, and I knew that my own eyes were wet. My father had explained to the mother that the first thing to be accomplished was to get her son to the river, so now we heard her say caressingly, "Come, John, my boy, take the first step upward, for your mother's sake, that in time I may have the joy of seeing you in our own home. Come, John, with mother." She gently drew him, and to our great joy we saw him rise and go with her, and their steps led them to the river. They walked hand in hand, and as far as we could see them, she seemed to be soothing and comforting him. "Thank God," said my father fervently. "There will be no further trouble now. When they return, he will see with clear vision." And so it was proved. After this, by divine permission, I became much of the time a co-laborer with my father, and thus enjoyed his society, and his instructions much oftener than otherwise I could have done. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. Some day, we say, and turn our eyes toward the fair hills of paradise. Some day, sometime, a sweet new rest shall blossom, flower like, in each breast. Some day, sometime, our eyes shall see the faces kept in memory. Some day, their hand shall clasp our hand, just over in the morning land. O morning land, O morning land. Edward H. Phelps. One evening, some 3 years counted by the calendar of earth, after I had entered upon the joys and duties of the heavenly life, I sat resting upon the upper veranda of our home. after a somewhat arduous journey to a distant city of the heavenly realm. From this part of the veranda, we caught rare glimpses of the river through the overhanging branches of the trees. And just below us, at a little distance, we could see the happy children at their play upon the lawn. Here my brother sought me out, and throwing himself upon a soft veranda lounge near, lay for a time motionless and silent. He looked as wearied as one can ever look in that life, but I felt no anxiety about him, for I knew the rest was sure. He had been absent on some earth mission much of the time for many days, and I knew from experience that some of the fatigue and care of earth will cling to us on such occasions till we are restored by heaven's balmy air and life giving waters. He had not told me, as he sometimes did, where his mission had led him, and I had not asked him, feeling sure that all of it was best I should know would be imparted. My own duties had of late been unusually responsible, leading me daily to a distant part of the heavenly kingdom. Hence I myself had not visited the beloved of earth for a much longer period than usually elapsed between my visits. When last seen, all of the dear ones had seemed in such vigorous health, and were so surrounded by earthly blessings, that I had ceased to feel they needed my ministrations, as in the early days of their sorrow. Hence I had thrown all of my energies into the work assigned me by the Master. At length, after a time of rest, my brother arose to a sitting posture, and regarding me for a moment in silence, said gently, "I have news for you, little sister." A thrill like an electric shock passed through me, and in an instant I cried out joyously, "He is coming?" He nodded his head with a sympathetic smile, but did not at once reply. "When will it be? Am I to go to him?" I asked. He hesitated an instant before saying, "Of course you are permitted to go, if your heart will not be denied." "Oh, I must go to him. I must be the first to greet him. Perhaps it may be granted him to see me even while he is yet in the flesh." He shook his head sadly at this and said, "No, dear, he will not know you." "Why? Frank, tell me all, and why you think, as I plainly see you do, that it is not best I should go." He was stricken suddenly in the midst of his work, while apparently in perfect health, and has not regained consciousness since, nor will he ever on earth. Hence your presence would be no solace to him. When was this? 3 days ago. I have been with him almost constantly, by day and night, ever since. Oh, why did you not sooner tell me? It was thought wise to spare you this unnecessary pain of seeing him suffer when you could not minister to him, and I have come to tell you now that you may go if you still so desire. He will know me as soon as the struggle is past? Yes, but he will be bewildered and weak. He will need stronger help and guidance than you alone can give, and you will miss the rapture of the meeting, as it would be a little later on. What would you have me do? You know I will yield to your wiser judgment, even against the pleadings of my heart. But I can wait. I will not say do not go. You shall accompany me if you wish. I only think that after the first bewilderment of the change has passed, after he has bathed in the waters of the river of life, he will be better prepared for the delightful reunion which awaits him. You remember what the waters did for you, and how bewildered and oppressed in spirit you were till you went with me that morning into the river. It is the same with all of us, only where there has been serious trouble with the brain at last, it is even more needed than on ordinary occasions. And that is the case with my brother. He will not be fully himself until the magical waters have swept the clouds from his brain. You are always right, my brother, and I will yield to your wise advice, although my heart cries out to hasten at once to his side. When will you return to him? Immediately. There will be little time to wait. With the quickening of the morning light, we will be here. My brave-hearted, wise little sister, the delay will be to you neither sorrowful nor long." He arose, and bending over me, dropped a kiss lightly on my brow, and in a moment he had passed from my sight. How strange, I thought, that even in this matter so near to my heart, I am able to yield unmurmuringly. Father, I thank thee. I thank thee for the glad reunion so near at hand, but even more than that, for the sweet submission in all things that has grown into my life, that I can yield to thy will even when thou wouldst permit it to be otherwise. I bowed my head upon my hand and gave myself up to mingled sad and happy thoughts. Was he, this dearly loved one, indeed insensible to his suffering? Would the Father mercifully spare him even the pang of the parting? Oh, that the morning were here! How could I wait even that brief while for the sight of the beloved face? Suddenly, a soft touch rested upon my bowed head, and a voice I had learned to recognize and love beyond all things in earth or heaven said, "Have I not said truly? Though he were dead, yet shall he live again?" What are now the years of separation, since the meeting again is at hand? "Come, and let us reason a little together," the Master said, smiling down into my uplifted face. He took my extended hand into his own, and sitting down beside me, continued, "Let us consider what these years have done for you. Do you not feel that you're infinitely better prepared to confer happiness than when you parted from him you love?" I nodded in glad affirmation. "Do you not realize that you stand upon a higher plane with more exalted ideas of life and its duties, and that in the strength of the Father, you two henceforward will walk upward together?" Again I gladly acquiesced. "Is the home life here less attractive than it was in the earth life?" "No, no, 1,000 times no!" I cried. "Then there is nothing but joy in the reunion at hand." "Nothing but joy," I echoed. Then the Savior led me on to talk of the one so soon to come, and I opened my glad heart to him and told him of the noble life, the unselfish toil, the high aspirations, the unfaltering trust of him I loved. I spoke of his fortitude in misfortune, his courage in the face of sore trial and disappointment, his forgiveness of even malicious injury, and concluded by saying, "He lived the Christianity many others professed. He always distanced me in that." The face of the Master glowed in sympathy as I talked, and when I ceased, he said, "I perceive that you have discovered the secret which makes marriage eternal as the years of heaven." "Oh," I said, "to me marriage must be eternal. How could it be otherwise, when two grow together and become as one? Death cannot separate them without destroying. They are no longer two perfect beings, but one in soul and spirit forever." "Ay," he answered, "but having the marriage rite pronounced does not produce this change. It is the divinity of soul wedded to soul that alone can do it." So he led me on until my soul flew upward as a lark in the early morning. He unfolded to me mysteries of the soul life that filled my heart with rapture, but which I may not here reveal. At length, to my infinite surprise, I saw the rosy glow deepening across the sky, and knew that morning, love's morning, hadn't dawned for me in heaven. The Master arose, and pointing to the radiance said, "By the time thou art ready to receive them, they will be here." And with a smile and a touch that made a benediction, he departed. As I arose and stood with face uplifted to the coming day, I caught in the near distant the triumphant notes of the angels' choral song, and this morning, as though in sympathy with my thought, they sang, "He is risen! Hear it, ye heavens, and ye sons of earth! He is risen, and has become the first fruits of them that slept. I lifted up my voice with joy and joined their thrilling song, and as they swept upward and the cadence died away, I slowly descended the stairway, crossed the lawn, whose flowers never crushed or withered beneath our feet, and sank for a moment beneath the pure waters of the river. I felt no haste, no unwonted excitement or unrest, though I knew that he was coming, for whom my soul had waited all these years. The Master's presence had filled me with calm and peace that nothing had power to disturb, had prepared and fitted me for the great happiness lying just before me. Uplifted with a new, strange delight, I recrossed the lawn, stopping upon the veranda before entering the house, to gather a knot of cream white roses and fasten them to my breast. Then, going to the library, I refilled the golden bowl with the spicy breathed scarlet carnations, laying one aside to fasten upon my husband's shoulder. I wanted to gather myself the flowers that would greet him on his coming. I twisted up my hair in the manner that he had most admired, and fastened a creamy bud within the folds, that I might seem to him as I had of old. Soon thereafter I heard voices and steps. Listen! Yes, it is the same dear step for which I had so often listened in the home life, the step that had always brought gladness to my heart and sunshine in our home. His step in heaven! I flew to the open doorway, and in an instant was held close in the strong arms and to the loving, throbbing heart of my dear husband. Was there anything more for me that heaven could give? My brother, with thoughtful care, passed onward to the upper rooms of the house, and for a while we were alone together, we whose lives had run so happily mingled through the long years of our mortal life. I drew him within the house, and in the vestibule again he took me in my arms and drew me to his heart. This is heaven indeed, he said. We passed into the flower room, and on its threshold he stood a moment, entranced with its beauty. But when I would have related to him its history, as my brother had given it to me, he said, Not today, my dear. I have only eyes and ears for you today. All else in heaven must wait. So we sat and talked together, as in the olden days, and the happy hours came and went, and the day melted into the twilight glow before we realized it was half spent. Our brother Frank had come to us about the noontide, and together we had gone over the lovely house, had stood upon the broad verandas, and eaten of the lovely fruit. Then we all sat together where I had spent the hours waiting in the presence of the blessed Master. I told them much that he then had said to me, and how he turned into triumphant rejoicing the hours which I had anticipated would pass in lonely waiting. The eyes of my dear husband were tear filled, and he pressed my hand, which he still kept in his, in tender sympathy. Oh, darling, it is a blessed, blessed life, I said. I already realize the blessedness, he replied. For has it not given me back my brother and my wife, my precious wife? Early the following morning, I said to my husband and our brother, We must go to Father and Mother Sprague's today. They have the first claim after ours, Frank. Yes, we will go at once, they both replied. So together we all started. In the earliest days of my heavenly life, I had sought out with much joy the home of my husband's parents, and was by them accorded, as in the earth life, a warm place in their hearts, and many happy hours had we spent together since. Now we were taking to them a favorite son, and I realized how his coming would bring gladness to their hearts and home. It was a joyful meeting, especially to our mother, and the day was far spent before we arose to return. William, said our mother, fondly laying her hand upon his arm, yours was a happy home on earth. I used to think a perfect home. It will be far happier here, with a loving glance at me. I am sure of that, mother. I have my dear wife and Frank constantly with me, and you and my father and Josephine, a favorite niece, to come here, and after a while, with a little hesitation, the holier joys and privileges of heaven. We turned to go, and upon the threshold met an aunt who, in the earth life, blind and helpless, had been a favorite with us all. "My dear children," she exclaimed, "how good it seems to see you all again!" "Aunt Cynthia," my husband said fondly. "Yes, Aunt Cynthia, but no longer groping helpless in the darkness. Whereas I once was blind, but now I see," she quoted, smiling happily. And so it was. The Master's touch had rested on the sightless eyes, and closing to the darkness of earth, they had opened upon the glories of heaven. Marvelous transition! No wonder we left her singing, "Glory to him who this marvel hath wrought, filling my spirit with joy and delight. Lo, in my blindness I safely have walked out of the darkness and into the light." End of chapter 17.